Ranged units. Noobs love them. They can provide damage without you really seemingly having to do anything. You just point and click and away they go. They complement your defensive playstyle perfectly. It's easy, right? Oh no. You fucking sausage. Come on in, sit down. Let old Zerky show you the way, because this is a big problem for a lot of noobs. So let's begin as always by embarrassing some noobs. This guy you can see is making a few mistakes, but his biggest one is that he's bought 4 missile units and 2 units of artillery. To get straight to the point, the problem with a lot of noobs is that they bring too many missiles. Now, while that can be a problem in itself, the other side of the story is that they don't bring enough protection for all of their missiles. This guy has 2 spear units to protect 6 freaking ranged units. That's just not enough. It's just not enough. Oh, some demigriffs coming back here. Okay, he's got 3 units to defend 6. Still not a freak enough. This guy is going to have a real hard time getting his money's worth out of all these ranged units. And it's made especially worse by the fact that he's facing my green tide. There is a whole lot of units coming his way, and he simply doesn't have enough time or units to protect all of his ranged. Now, another guy here playing as the Skaven. He's got a couple of Jezzails and a couple of artillery, all grouped up together, which is of course a mistake, as we hopefully know. But he does actually have a lot of protection for it. He's got a lot of units all around it, so, you know, they should be pretty safe, right? But even then, it's still possible to sneak a unit through. Here comes my Warhounds sneaking around this unit that foolishly tried to come out and pursue me, and now I'm able to munch down one of his artillery, and hey, that's gone before the battle's even really begun. So sometimes, no matter how much protection you provide, it can still be difficult to protect all those ranged units. And unlike previous Total Wars where it's fairly easy to protect missiles, Warhammer has so many threats that can get after missiles. Such as single large monsters that will just charge through your front line and get straight into the missiles, and there's very little you can actually do about it. Chariots, able to charge straight through a front line if they want to, or to flank round. Cavalry can also of course flank round, especially the faster kind. Not to mention smaller cavalry type units like Warhounds. Monstrous infantry, also able to push through a front line potentially or to flank around with a bit of speed. They can disrupt your missiles. And then of course there's good old magic, which can very easily be cast on anything. Good old summoned units can come out of literally nowhere and mess up your ranged, and there's basically nothing you can do to stop it. Vanguard deployed units that can come up behind you and easily get access to your missiles, especially if they have stalk, which will make them invisible until the last second. And of course flying units that'll just go straight over the top of everything else to get after your missiles or artillery. These can be lords, heroes, or of course just flying units themselves. So there is a whole ton of options that somebody has to try and get after and disrupt missile units. And it can be very difficult to keep them alive, especially if you're facing certain factions or if you're just a new player who doesn't know how to protect missile units well enough yet. And what can make it even harder is the defensive playstyle that a lot of newer players adopt. You may think you're creating less micromanagement for yourself by sitting in one spot and being defensive, when in fact you're doing the opposite. So bringing too many missiles is a problem. And as mentioned, inadequate protection is also a big problem. In this Skaven army, there's a couple of Jezzails, the Teeth Breakers, some mortars, and a catapult as well. So a lot of money invested into this ranged core. And what are they protecting it with? Clan rats. Fucking clan rats. Clan rats not known for their holding prowess. Skaven slaves also not known for their holding prowess. These units won't last long, will break pretty quickly, and will probably be the death of all your ranged units. They simply aren't tough enough to protect so much money of missiles. The enemy army is going to come in, break these units fairly quickly because they're not very good, and then all your missiles are going to get engaged and killed, because generally missile units and artillery suck in melee. So these two things in combination are the biggest problem that I see with a lot of noobs online. They either bring far too many missiles and no protection, or they bring a bunch of protection but it's not very good and they don't know how to use it properly, and thus their missiles still get killed. The bigger question you should be asking is how much of my money am I spending on all of my ranged units? In a typical battle you'll get 12,400 funds. Are you spending 20% on missiles? 40%? 50%? Okay, how much money are you putting on the protection of those units? 10%? 20%? Is it enough? Probably not. What you need to ask yourself is, can I get the money's worth out of this unit? If you bring a whole bunch of expensive units, they need to do a whole lot of work and killing and damage to get the money back. A unit of Teeth Breakers, for example, costs 1,050. That's a lot of money for a single unit. You need to be making sure it either gets a lot of kills or does a lot of damage. If it doesn't, it's not good value for money. And that's ultimately what it comes down to. Value for money. Not necessarily the number of units. For example, if you bring 2 Jezzails, 2 Rattling Gunners and a Mortar, that'll cost you 4,450 for those 5 units. If you bring 5 units of Empire Archers who only cost 350, that's only 1,750 total cost. That is a very different percentage of your total funds available. So if the Skaven can't get a lot of damage or kills done with their 5 units, they're probably done for. But for the Empire, who didn't spend a ton on missile units, even if they can't protect their 5 units and they don't get a lot of damage or kills done, it doesn't matter too much because they've still got a lot of money left to try and win the battle. So take into account your value for money of the units you're bringing. However, this doesn't change the fact that 5 missile units can still be difficult to protect. Now let's take a look at an army that a noob might bring to a battle thinking they've made some good choices. We'll use the Empire as an example because a lot of noobs like to play Empire. There's 2 units of handguns, 2 huntsmen and a cannon. So a lot of ranged units, which is a lot to protect, which this army doesn't really have a lot of, any kind of protection units. Got a couple of spears, some cavalry, the Lord, but still these units are going to be ill protected when the battle starts to get going. And this is often a mistake of the newbie Empire players. They think Empire is a good balanced faction to play, when really they're probably one of the harder factions to play because their infantry kinda sucks. So when the enemy barrels up to them, they try to rely on their missile units to win the battle for them. But their range only comes up to about here, maybe here for some of them. So that's not a lot of time to shoot the enemy. Not a lot of time to make use of all those missiles that you've brought along. A lot of missile units do most of their damage after the enemy army has arrived, not before. So if you can't protect your missile units after the enemy has arrived, they're probably going to get run through and murdered. Which is often what occurs on my streams when newbie players are playing the Empire. They bring too many missiles, they have inadequate protection for those missiles, and they just get destroyed. They don't have time to get the value out of those units that they paid for, so they go to waste and they lose because most of their funds didn't go into the rest of the army. It went all in those missile units that got destroyed. Now, as an alternative to that noob Empire army, here's a similar one but with a few changes. I've got an extra unit of greatswords with the money I've saved because they've got some good damage output. I've only got 1 unit of handgunners for my infantry and 1 great cannon. Those are the only 2 that really need protecting. My other missile units is a war wagon which can skirmish and keep itself out of trouble, and some pistoliers who can also do the same. Skirmish units are a great alternative to missile infantry for a few reasons. Number 1, their mobility. They can keep themselves out of trouble. You don't have to worry about protecting them, they can just run away from stuff. They can dodge the magic, they can outrun the cavalry and the chariots and the single large monsters, the monstrous infantry, the summoned units, most of the flying units they can outrun. Their mobility and speed is their key to survival, which is what missile infantry doesn't have. So you don't need to worry about paying money to protect most of them, they can protect themselves. The downside is though that their damage output is a lot slower than missile infantry because there's just not as many models in the unit. However, if you can just keep them alive and let them survive, they'll be able to use all their ammo and do all the damage they possibly can, thus hopefully giving you their value for money. Saying that, skirmish infantry can be effective in the same way. Deepwood scouts, chameleon skinks, shadow warriors, gutter runners, they can all run away from things, keep themselves somewhat safe and still do damage all the while, unlike one-directional firing missile infantry. Of course, they're not as safe and as mobile as skirmish cav or chariots or any other skirmish unit, but they can still do some damage while they're on the move. So consider skirmish units as an alternative to missile infantry. There's lots of them in lots of different armies. You can stick them on skirmish, have them attack somebody, and they'll mostly keep themselves out of trouble. It's not a flawless mechanic though, the skirmish button. Do keep an eye on your units, they may get caught, they may run in a really bad direction, but it can certainly decrease the micro you'll have to do if your skirmish units are mostly looking after themselves. This will make it a lot easier to focus on looking after your more stationary missile and ranged units because there's only a couple of them. So if you're one of those players that mostly plays defensive, that brings a lot of ranged units, and who mostly loses, then this might be the reason why. So try bringing less missile units, more infantry or cavalry or monsters, things that can do more certain damage, that you don't have to worry about protecting. Things that are easier to get the value for money from. Or skirmish alternatives, of course. This may mean though that you need to play more aggressively. You can't just sit there and hope all your missiles are going to do the work for you. You need to learn to be a bit more aggressive and to take the initiative, which is one of the most important things, which is going to be the next noob mistake. So get ready for that one. And don't get me wrong with all of this. It's not that playing defensively or that playing with a lot of missiles is a bad way to play necessarily. It can work. Some people can be very dangerous and very powerful playing defensive with a lot of ranged units. Of course though, some factions are just designed to play more defensively, like the Vampire Coast or Dwarves. And that's another thing to consider. Who is your opponent and what is their playstyle? Are they going to make it difficult for you to protect a lot of missiles? If you're facing the Greenskins or Norska or the Vampire Counts or the Beastmen, you can rest assured they're probably going to rush up on you and make it difficult for you to protect a lot of missiles. So don't bring a lot of them, or bring skirmish alternatives instead. However, if you're facing the Empire, or the High Elves, or the Vampire Coast, or the Wood Elves, ranged heavy factions, you can rest assured they'll probably have a little bit of a skirmish with you. So more missile units might work better. Of course, there's a million variables going on with that, but things to think about. So there you go. Excessive missiles may be causing your downfall. You may have put too much money into your missiles, you may have put not enough money into their protection, and one way or another you're not getting your value for money from these units. And of course, value for money applies to every single unit that you bring, from the infantry to the cavalry to the monsters. You want to try and get the most out of them to give you the best chance of winning. I hope you've enjoyed this. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the future.